Welcome to the WCEG Talk Radio. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. I am Dr. Babs, your show host for this evening's segment on the holistic perspective. I am a family and integrative medicine physician and the founder of Living at Your Finest Wellness, which is a membership-based practice in Marietta, Georgia. I am joined by my dear colleague who I haven't seen like forever. We went to college. I'm so proud to be with him, Dr. Olatunji Olaoye. He is a board-certified internist, obesity and life medicine, sleep medicine specialist, all the things. And he lives in the Houston area. So I'm so pleased that he is joining me as a co-host today. So what are we going to do today? We are going to enrich you with information that is inspirational and impactful. Today, in honor of the National Sleep Awareness Month, we are going to discuss sleep awareness in all aspects. We're going to talk about best practices, how to optimize health, longevity, as well as productivity. So the question of the hour that we have for you today, we want you to think about this. How much sleep are you getting? And if you're not getting enough sleep, what is staying in the way of your sleep? There's so many answers to all these questions, but I want you to think about it as we, go through just a few things before we get started. Our goal this evening is to talk about the importance of sleep. We have a sleep expert in the house. We're going to talk about the different sleep disorders, and we're going to talk about the different treatments, all right? And then commonly asked questions. So please tag a friend, share with your neighbors, so that you can stay updated. We're live on all the social media handles, online streams, name it, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, we're there. We're also on the radio network. We also have an app. Yes, we have an app, so you can stay updated with all our meaningful topics. All right, we ensure that we provide meaningful value for you, and we really want to support you in your health and wellness journey. But two quick important announcements. Before we get started, I want you to be aware that yes, we are physicians, but we're not your physicians. So the information we're providing is general information just to support your wellness journey. We're not privy to your specific needs. And then the second announcement is that our views and opinions that are expressed by either myself or my co-host are not necessarily views or opinions of the network and its management. As I always like to start, I like to start with a quote. And this one was pretty interesting. It says, if you are going to do something tonight that you'll be sorry for tomorrow morning, sleep late. I thought that was a good one. So sleep late if you want to do something that you will regret the next morning. I know I've been guilty of that, where I've slept, and I slept late, maybe binge watching Netflix or something, and then I regretted it the next morning. So this was by an English-American comedian. So we're going to get started. I want to first of all, again, welcome my dear colleague, Dr. Olatunji. I just want to give him the opportunity to share more about what he does and then share his thoughts about sleep and what's the importance of sleep. What is the relevance of sleep?
Thank you, Dr. Babalola. Well, I've known you for a while, although we haven't seen. For those who may not know, we actually went to school together at some point. Thanks for having me on your show. And I'm hoping that your viewers and listeners would get enriched today in terms of, learning a little bit more about sleep that they did not know yesterday. And hopefully they will be able to sleep a whole lot better. Okay. So basically, a little bit about myself. I trained in internal medicine. I'm board certified. I also did a fellowship in sleep medicine. I'm board certified as well. Currently practice in Houston. I also recently launched a full online sleep clinic, meaning that everything that you can do at the brick and mortar clinic, we can actually also do it online from the comfort of your home, your boat, the 30 minutes that you have to, break. And so you can actually, do all of that. But to the topic at hand, sleep. It's interesting. In the previous centuries, sleep was actually thought to be a state between being alive and being dead. So it didn't have a definition. It was thought to just be something that just came on. Not until the 1930s that it was recognized that sleep is actually active. And so you may think, oh, I'm going to sleep, that's it. But actually, it's an active process. And that's why when you don't sleep, there are specific repercussions that comes along with that. And so sleep is as essential as eating food because it has its own impact on the body. It's aptly termed powering down. And so it's that process where your body actually, tends to recuperate, quote unquote. A memory gets formed, um, growth happens, and a host of other things that actually happen through sleep. In addition to resting what you've been using all day. As an example, your heart rate actually slows down when you sleep. Why is that important? Because in as much as your heart powers the rest of your body, it also needs to be powered. And so when you sleep and your heart rate goes down, you get more blood flow to your heart that actually also then replenishes and powers your heart. Another very good example is your blood pressure. And so actually when you do sleep, because of all the other processes going on, your blood pressure actually lowers during sleep. And that eventually would bring us to one of the cardinal one of the cardinal diseases of sleep is obstructive sleep apnea, which is directly related to high blood pressure. And it's a process where when you don't sleep, certain things go on that tend to raise your blood pressure. So sleep, there's a lot of things associated with sleep, both passive and active. And as we go on in the show, we're going to talk about the various sleep disorders that are that are existent, and we're going to try and focus on the more common and the more relatable and recognizable ones. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, even the heart needs to take a break.
It
The
does.
pulse, it needs to take a break. I mean, everything slows down. So you put it so nicely. And as you were speaking, I was just imagining the body, just all the things that it needs to take a rest from. I remember hearing that out of all the mammals that we have, we human beings are the ones that we find a way to ignore sleep, but yet it's so
Yep.
cardinal to our survival. It is so cardinal. We're the only ones, right? Every other mammal knows when it's time to sleep, they sleep. We're the ones that stay in our way. So before we speak about those different disorders, I want to share a slide just to, show people those systems that you just spoke about, that let me just see if I can expand it so that people can see. Ooh, let's see, present it. Let's see. I hope, can you see it? Does it look good? Is
Yep.
it
Yep.
big enough?
That's
Okay.
that. That's
Yeah.
it.
So effect
Yeah.
of sleep deprivation. So you see all the systems, right?
Right.
Like dear colleague just mentioned, the heart rate. You see that? Risk of heart disease. If you do not sleep, the heart doesn't get its well-needed rest. The way I look at it, it's cleaning and consolidation, all those things, the immune system, the risk of chronic diseases. You mentioned the growth hormone, right? If you don't sleep,
Correct.
that is not
Correct.
activated. So irritability, I know I've been irritable if I don't have a good night rest, and especially in the field that we're in. Remember when it used to be the 80 hours work week and then they decreased it because of all the errors from sleep deprivation, right?
And yeah, exactly. And that's really important is that, like you said, consolidation.
Yeah.
It's akin to a car going at 100 miles an hour. At some point, it has to slow down. Otherwise, it's just going to blow, quote unquote, the gasket.
Right, right.
Um, and and so, looking at the effect of sleep deprivation, it more or less drives home the fact that adequate sleep actually does a lot for the body.
Yeah.
This is a snapshot of what happens when you don't get enough sleep.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we as Americans do not get enough sleep.
I think in the whole world, just not even America alone. I think we human being species all together, we just don't. And I think
No,
it's
no,
getting worse even with our children, right? The adults are not getting
correct,
sleep,
correct.
the kids are not getting sleep. Yeah. So I want to share this next with you and see if you can give us, before we talk about those the different disorders and conditions, which you're an expert in managing in your practice, which we'll talk about sleep apnea. But this over here is kind of like the picture of how the different cycles of sleep. Can you share more light into this, the different cycles? Because people always say, okay, well, what is my minimum amount? Maybe if I get two and I feel okay, what's the big deal? Why do I have to hit all the different cycles of sleep? So can you share some light to this picture and
So
how it works?
correct. So basically, the picture is more or less a caricature of what actually happens through
Mm-hmm.
the sleep process. So there are different sleep stages or sleep cycles, as we call them. And each of the stages tend to have a specific function, so to speak, that it does. So broadly speaking, there are four stages. Okay. We have the stage one, stage two, stage three sleep, and we have what we call the rapid eye movement or the REM sleep. For stage one, you're pretty much just going into light sleep. And so most of the time at that point, you're sort of, your muscles are relaxing, you're trying to, recuperating, all the toxic muscle enzymes are actually getting slowly cleaned out. And then you have the stage two and stage three. The stage three, quote unquote, is the deep sleep. Um, Kind of a misnomer, but it's what we call a deep sleep. During that period, is you consolidate on, some of the but the processes. You have again a lot of muscle relaxations going on. You have physical I would say physical repair. I don't like using the term repair because it suggests that something is damaged.
Broken.
But
Okay.
but repair in the sense that you've used up a lot of stuff all day, so it's now
Mm-hmm.
being
Maybe
replenished.
like restoration or
Correct,
replenish.
correct,
Okay.
correct,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
And there's some level of memory consolidation as well,
Mm-hmm.
which also extends into the REM sleep, where you have memory consolidation and a dream. Believe it or not, dreaming is actually an active process. And one of the importance of the REM sleep is the fact that your muscles are actually paralyzed during REM sleep. And that is really important because that is when mostly you dream. So 80% of your dreams happen during REM sleep. And because your muscles are paralyzed, you do not act out your dreams. Because otherwise, if you dream that you're jumping off a cliff,
Then you would
you
actually want
literally
to do
can
it.
jump out of the bed because
Yeah.
your muscles are more or less paralyzed, you do not,
You
act
don't
out
act
those
it out.
dreams.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, and so those are the importance of going through each of the stages. And each stage has a specific time, and then it goes in loops. Roughly, it takes about 90 minutes from stage one through REM and back.
Yeah.
And so you just continue to cycle through. So it's a continuous process. And in terms of how many hours you sleep, the recommendation at this point for adults is 7 to 9 hours. Now, again, like you mentioned, some will say, well, I slept only 3, 4 hours and I'm good. Actually, too little sleep in itself can actually cause a lot of problems. And some of those problems do not become apparent until it's actually a little bit late to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
thing as too much sleep itself is actually not good either. There's been a ton of studies that is showing association between, short sleep and several, cardiovascular, neurological issues that has been noted downstream.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for that detailed illustration of the cycle, the different cycles and the fact that it runs true. So every 90 minutes, you get about 5 of them total, I guess will add up to
Correct.
that 7 to 9. And I know anytime I sleep past my setting sweet spot, which is 8, the times when I sleep 9, I really feel worse. And the same thing, so not too much, not too little, just that spot. So there are some commonly asked questions we'll talk about as we go along, but there are two
Yep.
questions that I see here about the REM. Some question in the chat box about nightmares. So I'll hand that over to my colleague. What are your thoughts about REM when nightmares occur, and what occurs when you have too? Okay, well, we already answered that. What happens when you have too little or too much? Yes, those are the questions. I guess we can take that now. What are your
Sorry, what was the first
The
question?
first question is
Nightmares or REM?
nightmares. Yeah, nightmares. Does that occur during the REM, right? So the part where you're having the REM, the rapid eye movement, and then the second question was what actually happens. Certainly, if you get too little, you're not hitting all those things that we talked about in the first chart that shows sleep deprivation, because you are sleep deprived. Anything
Correct.
between less than 5, you're severe insomnia. When you're between that 5 and 6, then you're moderate, and then you have mild, anywhere from 6 to 7 mild insomnia. So certainly if you are less, then you're not hitting all those benefits that you get, which we already mentioned. You wouldn't see that in the immediate, but it will gradually, happen. In terms of what happens if you exceed the number of hours of required sleep, like 9, what are those things that occur to people if they sleep too much?
So, I mean, when you sleep too much, one, it actually may be a sign of a sleep disorder because the body is such that there's a recommended amount of sleep it's going to get. And so so sleep is in two parts. You have the quantity and you have the quality. And so the quantity is the 7 to 9 hours, which is different from the quality. And so what that means is if you do not get the quality of sleep that you need, you may actually sleep 10, 11 hours, yet you do not feel as if you've slept or you do not feel refreshed. Okay. Some people sleep shorter and still feel refreshed. There's a very small subcategory of people, and we call them the short sleepers, who they can sleep less than 5 hours they still feel refreshed, and they do not have any, medical repercussions. Now, that's a very small subset of people. It's not the norm.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that your viewers know that yes,
Yeah.
something like that exists. That you have short sleepers and you have some long sleepers who they sleep more than 10 hours in order to achieve the same thing that somebody sleeping 7 to 9 hours will. Outside of those two outliers, sleeping too long actually reverses some of the gains you've made when you sleep the recommended hours. Because the body and the sleep is recommended by what we call there's a biologic clock. We actually have a clock somewhere in the brain that determines how the processes move in relation to each other. And so when you sleep too long, you're more or less putting a clog in the wheel of that clock, which then, affects other processes in your body that the clock also controls. So same thing for short and for long sleep. And so it's about the disruption to the normal clock activity that tends to produce some of the problems when you sleep too long or when you sleep too short.
Good, very good.
Okay.
That was well said. So we have that circadian rhythm. So we all have clocks. And so if
Correct.
you exceed, then you're putting a halt in other activities of the body. So important to know that average, so that 7 to 9. And again, just know the very few percentage. If some people, I've had people tell me, well, maybe I'm just one of those few percent. You got to be honest with yourself. If you're not
Correct.
if you're not fulfilling your duty the way you should, you're not part of those small percent. Because the people that are in that small, they can function normally. I mean, I was kidding myself a few years ago when I was struggling with sleep issues. And I was like, no, they used to say, in our country, right? We say sleep is for the what? You sleep when when you die. That's when you sleep.
Yeah, that's when you sleep.
Yeah, but I very quickly learned that was not true, because when you find yourself sleeping on the highway, that's dangerous. That you're not that small subset. The small subset will feel refreshed within that time frame. So you have to be honest with yourself. If you're not productive, if you're always falling sick, if you're having hunger issues, your hormones are off, then you know that you're not getting the adequate sleep. So I think we can proceed now and talk about some of those conditions. Which ones do you commonly see in your practice? I know sleep apnea is a big one that I see a lot in my practice. There are people that just have chronic insomnia. They're just not sleeping well just because distractions are there. There could be restless leg syndrome, but I'll hand it over to you to share whether those commonly seen and how do we diagnose it? How do we know that that's even what they have? I do have an insomnia severity index that I can share, but I'll let you finish with just what is out there, what you see in your practice.
So basically, there's a whole spectrum of sleep disorders, from sleeping too much to not sleeping. The two common ones are sleeping too much, which is usually actually with obstructive sleep apnea. And when you don't sleep, it's insomnia. So we'll take when people feel excessively sleepy during the day, it's usually a manifestation of what happened at night. Okay. And so the bulk of my practice, the ones where I commonly see are the obstructive sleep apnea. And what's obstructive sleep apnea? It's what happens when you stop breathing at night, which can be scary to some people. But the commonest symptom is loud snoring. And so when people snore loudly, most of the time, the sleeper does not know that they're snoring. It's usually a partner, a bedmate, or they go on camping, and that's the first time they sleep with somebody and say, "Oh, you were snoring loudly last night." Occasionally, though, some people would wake up choking at night. So that feeling of waking up choking may actually be a symptom of obstructive sleep apnea. And it's actually very common in the US, and most of the people have not even been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea. So I see a lot of obstructive sleep apnea. I see a lot of insomnias. Now, insomnia is particularly challenging because by the time you see somebody with insomnia in your clinic, it's actually been going on for a couple of years at least. Because it starts gradually as, oh, I can't sleep. And then the behaviors that we then do, unfortunately, then reinforces the insomnia. And it then becomes a vicious cycle. And it takes a lot of lifestyle changes to actually be able to get to the bottom of insomnia. So apart from obstructive sleep apnea and insomnia, there are other sleep disorders, like you mentioned. Restless leg syndrome is actually a sleep disorder where you feel the urge to move your legs at night, and unless you move it, you don't feel comfortable, and that often wakes people up and can prevent you from sleeping. So at times it can be a trigger for insomnia, and it can be something that perpetuates insomnia itself. Then we have the other disorders like narcolepsy, which is something that a lot of people hear about all the time. So narcolepsy is also an important sleep disorder. It's not as common as obstructive sleep apnea, but it is debilitating as well. Narcolepsy happens when simply they can't just keep awake. In any situation, they are falling asleep, driving, doing anything, they are falling asleep. And so that's, a very important sleep disorder. And what I often tell a lot of my patients, or when I, talk to people, is if you think you have any problems with your sleep, just get it checked out. Your PCP is a good resource. He would know who to send you to, because it's important you pick it up early and get it treated.
Absolutely. So we don't want to delay. We do not want to delay. Sleep is so cardinal. Whatever the issue is, you want to gauge not just the quantity, but the quality of your sleep. So important. And of course, we hear a lot about having to make sure that you sleep about the same time, even if it's a weekend during the week, but you want to have that checked as quick as possible. I do have this index that I want to just share, and I want to hear your take and find out if you have any other skills that you use. I mean, with sleep apnea, you already talked about what those symptoms, commonly seen symptoms, sleeping during the day, you can't hold a conversation, you're dozing, at night you're snoring. There are questions which we'll address towards the end about the commonly asked questions. People ask, well, so it's for every snorer, everybody that snores, do they have sleep apnea? So we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about that in the commonly asked questions. But again, those symptoms, there are things to always look out for. Now, can you see my screen? Is it up just to you? Let me see if we
Yes,
can make it
yes.
bigger.
Just
This
make
is
it a
like
little
a,
bigger.
yeah, let me make it bigger. So this is like a quick and dirty, very fast one to do. It's like more 7 questions, really. Which one do you use? Do you use another skill other than this? This one is what I use really quick in the practice. If I
So
have
the ISI,
minutes.
yes,
Mhm.
yes. The Insomnia Severity Index has actually been validated. So yes, this is what I use as well.
Okay, perfect.
It's
All right.
it's 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 pretty encompassing, and
Mhm.
it gives you a quick lowdown of what's going on.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, in the treatment and in the further evaluation, there are
Mhm.
other things we use.
Mhm.
The index is just a quick snapshot
Yes. Yes.
of how are you doing here now.
Right. Right.
We typically employ sleep diaries
Mhm.
to try and gauge what the sleep habits are like.
Mhm.
So in my practice, I always use a 2-week sleep diary for
Okay.
every patient who I see with insomnia.
Mhm.
And the 2-week sleep diary sort of gives us an idea of what your sleep has been like
Mhm.
um, over the previous 2 weeks. It also gives us points where we can then determine where the issues causing the insomnia is and
Mhm.
where we can then intervene.
Right, right, right. Very good, very good. So the questions here that we would like our viewers to ask themselves, where do you fall? The 7 to 9, are you getting that amount of hours? If you're getting it, do you feel well rested? So question is difficulty falling asleep. Usually we say the latency time should not be anything more than 15 minutes. If you're taking longer, that something is not is not the best. So if you I know that if people hit the bed and they knock out, that means they're probably so tired. So the question is a scale of 1 to 4. Are you having difficulty staying asleep? Some people don't have difficulty falling asleep, but staying asleep. Are you having problems waking up too early? Other questions: are you satisfied or dissatisfied with your current sleep patterns? Do you think your sleep problem in terms of impairing the quality of your life? Because that matters. Um, Recently, I know there was a study that said people that are sleep deprived, they're equivalent to people that have been under the influence of alcohol, right? If they do
Alcohol.
this test, if they do
Correct,
that,
correct.
yeah. So if it's affecting the quality of your life, that is not good as well. That does not promote optimal well-being. And then does it worry you, your current sleep? So all of this coming together, by the time you put the 7 question 2, then you add it up to come up with what your subtotal is. So this, again, as mentioned, this is just a quick and dirty, very quick, just to see where you are. And depending on your score, will determine what other skills are there and how else to proceed in terms of what treatment modality. Now, in terms of diagnosis, is there like a specific, like, people get MRI, CT scans and things like that? Is there anything in particular that you would say other than basic sleep diary or doing the index? Is there any other, like, I know sleep study, so maybe you can share a little bit about who are the people that get sleep studies? Who do you recommend for a sleep study? What should our viewers ask their PCPs, or what do they need to know? Maybe they have a loved one. What do they need to know about the sleep study?
Right. So basically, for both is so I would take it from the insomnia perspective.
Okay.
One of the other causes of insomnia actually can be sleep apnea. And with sleep apnea, you stop breathing multiple times a night, which in turn, it fragments your sleep. We talked about quality and quantity. One of the key with sleep apnea is it destroys your sleep quality. And so you wake up in the morning and you don't feel as if you've had any sleep, and all you want to do is go back to sleep. Uh, or you have all those that snore very loudly. Now we're going to come back to do all snorers have sleep apnea?
I guess you can answer it now while we're
Right. So not all snoring is sleep apnea, but I would say if you snore, get checked out for sleep apnea, because snoring itself indicates that you have some level of airway narrowing when you're sleeping. What happens during sleep, we talked about the fact that your muscles go to rest, quote unquote. And so the muscles around your airway normally should not fall asleep. But what tends to happen is, when you fall asleep, when you have lower tone, they can then, collapse and cause, obstruction. And when your body then tries to pull air past it, it then makes the noise that causes the snoring. Now, it's almost always the initial signal of sleep apnea. And in some patients, there's some people we call simple snoring, which means that they did not meet the criteria for sleep apnea. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect. It just means that at this point in time, based on the criteria that we use to make diagnosis, you do not meet the diagnosis for sleep apnea. We still treat snoring because the same snoring can still lead you to become sleepy during the day. It just means that, if you don't meet the criteria, you don't meet the criteria. Now, how do you meet the criteria? We do a sleep study. So a sleep study is what it is. We study you when you sleep. And there are two major forms of sleep study we do. You can do a sleep study at home, and you can actually go to a facility to sleep and be studied overnight. Now, what we found is for most people with sleep apnea, doing a sleep study at home is actually as effective as going to spend the whole night sleeping somewhere else. When you do it at home, it's your house, it's your bed. Okay, and we get all the parameters that we actually need to make a diagnosis. Now, there are a few people with certain medical issues that will not be appropriate to do a home sleep study on. And so we usually would advise that you see a sleep specialist, because a sleep specialist is being trained to be able to determine who will benefit from doing a sleep study at home and who needs to go to the lab to sleep, in order for the study to be done. I can go in and describe all the sleep study, but I'm not sure it's particularly
I think
helpful.
that's good. That's good
Yeah.
information, because people always, they're curious. What is a sleep study? Do I qualify for a sleep study? Where do I get the referral for a sleep study? So I think that's good. And I love that we also have home now. Some people can do it at home, but you have to meet the criteria for home. So
Correct.
it makes it convenient for that. Okay, very good. So I think we've covered, the different aspects of sleep disorder, whether we're talking insomnia, the different reasons, and the sleep apnea when it comes to sleeping, excessive sleeping. With restless leg syndrome, I know that there's some blood work that can be done to diagnose that, right? When we're checking like for ferritin, iron deficiency, and things like that.
So with restless leg syndrome, what we know is actually a clinical diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
However, we do know there are some associations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So iron deficiency has been associated with restless leg syndrome. And so in certain patients, you may not need medication that we use. All that may need to be done is just to replace the iron. So you're right. So yes, so any patient that we actually make a diagnosis of restless leg automatically gets an iron panel because we recognize that iron deficiency can lead to restless leg syndrome.
The whole idea is getting to the root cause of the problem, right? And that's hence the reason
Correct.
why you have the diary.
Correct.
See what are some of
Exactly.
those things that go on. So
Correct.
again, it
Correct.
requires a thorough evaluation of your sleep patterns, the habits, the association, all those things to be able to come up with a definitive treatment based on the symptoms that you are having. So very good. So I guess now we can talk about, we know that with sleep apnea, if it's diagnosed to meet criteria, then the treatment would be based on,
Correct.
right? So you might need to get, maybe you can say a few words about what that looks like in your practice for people that would need the CPAP. How do they get that monitored and managed?
Okay.
Maybe you
Yeah.
can say a few words
So
on
so
that.
so so for sleep apnea, once you have a diagnosis, okay, and there are three different levels of sleep apnea. We have what we call the mild sleep apnea, we have the moderate, and we have the severe. Okay. The right now the gold standard of care for sleep apnea is CPAP. CPAP just means a continuous positive airway pressure, which involves having a machine and wearing a mask. And what the mask does is that it senses when you stop breathing and gives you a breath to try and also bypass the obstruction and get rid of the apnea. Now, that's the commonest treatment, but that's not the only treatment. And there are some people who cannot tolerate CPAP for one reason or the other. Either they feel the pressure is too much, either they are claustrophobic and cannot put anything at all on their face,
I have a few patients like that.
really just hate the idea of carrying a thing and putting a tube and, around. There are alternatives. One alternative is something we call the mandibular advancement device. So it's like a mouth guard, but it's a specifically designed oral device that's actually been validated to treat sleep apnea. Now, for most intent and purposes, it's usually used to treat mild to moderate sleep apnea. Although now there's some studies looking at the use in severe sleep apnea, but most of the time it's mild to moderate, and it involves having a dental sleep medicine expert actually fabricate the sleep oral device for you. There's some people who have very severe sleep apnea who would not be a candidate for either oral device and still cannot tolerate CPAP. For those, there is something we call Inspire. So Inspire is like a pacemaker for sleep, and it involves surgery where you have the small machine placed on the chest, and then it controls the jaw during the sleep period. So you actually have a small remote, and it's programmed, and that has been very successful in a lot of people. But it involves, surgery and putting the pacemaker on. There's also surgery for sleep apnea. And so in terms of surgery, like we said, one of the key causes of sleep apnea is when you have a very, very narrow airway that collapses. And so one of the surgical treatment for sleep apnea is to actually go in and quote unquote clear the passageway. Okay. Now, again, it has to be, there has to be an assessment to determine if you will benefit from that surgery. And, some patients actually still need CPAP even after the surgery. And so it's not one all be
Always, it's not.
all, oh, I'm just going to get the surgery and then we're
And
done.
then that's
No,
it. Yeah.
it happens for some people, for some,
Yeah.
it doesn't. There's
Oh.
another type of surgery where they actually completely rearrange the jaw.
Mm.
They break it down, they rearrange it for sleep apnea. Again,
Mm.
there are some specific patients that may
Mm-hmm.
be useful for, where they have some facial deformities that actually leads to the sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Currently, there's also a lot of studies that are now looking at tablets for the treatment of sleep apnea.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
few studies that have shown promise,
Okay.
but at this point,
It's
most
still in
of
the work.
those are typically for the mild sleep apnea.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think there's one of them that the FDA is are going to license soon for the
Okay.
treatment of sleep
For
apnea.
mild. Okay. Okay.
Correct, but they're mostly effective for
Mm-hmm.
mild sleep apnea. Yes.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's just to show you how common sleep apnea is, that we have all these different numerous treatment modalities.
Right.
I do know that coupled with all of that, lifestyle medicine is also very huge, right? Because we talked about the circumference.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
just
I was
yeah, that is
so
big for the
so
circumference of the neck, the weight
in
loss
a,
and
in
weight
so,
wellness matters.
correct. So one of the risk factors for sleep
Mm-hmm.
apnea is
Mm-hmm.
actually obesity.
Mm-hmm.
And so weight loss
Yeah.
actually is I would say, treatment for sleep
Yeah.
apnea.
Yeah.
And simply because, I mean, I've had some patients who all they did
Yeah.
was lose weight,
And I had a
and they
patient
were
like that too.
and they were able to come off the
Yeah, the
CPAP
CPAP. Yeah.
completely.
Yeah. I had a
So yes,
patient like that
so
too.
weight loss and good lifestyle choices
Mm-hmm.
actually are also a form of treatment for sleep
Mm-hmm.
apnea.
Yeah, definitely. So, this has been quite extensive, and it's just to empower our audience to know that there are treatment options. But whichever option, you definitely want to collaborate with your PCP and go to a sleep specialist. Dr. Olatunji will give you more information about his practice since it's virtual. I believe you're licensed in several states, right? Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I do have a full-fledged online sleep clinic.
Mm-hmm.
We just recently launched a couple of weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I am licensed in multiple states, up to
Okay.
about 20 states. So if anybody who lives in any of those states can easily get an appointment, because
Mm-hmm.
and one of the drivers was, I realized that some people are waiting 2 months,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
3 months to see a
Mm-hmm.
sleep doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to make an appointment, they have to, cancel work, schedule work, just if they then call them, oh, we have an appointment, they then have to rearrange their lifestyle to meet the
Mm-hmm.
appointment,
Yeah.
which, shouldn't
So
be
you pretty much
so.
made it convenient with your virtual
Correct,
practice
convenient,
to be able
and you
to.
still get the full-fledged,
Right.
complement of
Yeah.
seeing a board-certified, fellowship-trained
Mm-hmm.
sleep
Mm-hmm.
doctor. And uh we can also do the home sleep studies. We've contracted, so it gets delivered to you. It gets picked up. Everything is from the comfort of your home. So it's a full-fledged clinic, meaning that
Great.
from diagnosis through treatment and follow-ups, we can do everything,
That's
and you do
fantastic.
not have to leave your house.
That's
Uh,
fantastic.
Fun fact, if you go to our website, there are resources there, including sleep hygiene, best sleep practices, and there's a ton of information about a lot of sleep disorders. Sleep
Yeah.
apnea, narcolepsy, you would find it all on the website. And should you want to book an appointment, it's a very streamlined, easy process. No more than several clicks, and you get to make your own appointment at the time of your choosing that you are available for.
That will be suitable. Very good. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So tons of information on the website, and I believe it's going to be shared so that you can click on that. But since you mentioned sleep hygiene, let me just share this as we begin to wrap up. Our hour is coming to a close. I want to share these sleep hygienes. So again, you've heard why is sleep important. You've heard about the different sleep disorders that are out there. If you're here and you're saying, what can I do to improve my sleep? These are just general tips that I always like to share. Three main things. You really need it to be dark, quiet, and cool, right? Your night begins in the morning. So you heard us talk about the biological clock, the circadian rhythm. Just going outdoors to get that sunlight against your eyes helps to build that serotonin, which converts to melatonin at night, which is really what gets us to sleep. So if it is bright, you want to make sure you prevent that, dim the light, because that's going to block your melatonin. So some tips is definitely, time, know when are you about to, when do you need to wake up? Count backwards to know when you really should be getting ready for bed. I'm a big believer of routines. We are creatures of habits. So we definitely need to have that. At least for me, I know it works. And maybe Dr. Olatunji, maybe he has a wind down routine that he does. Mine is an hour before bedtime, which, I'm prepping my brain, telling my brain, hey, it's time to sleep, turning off my phone, dimming the lights, making sure that the temp is down. Sometimes people want to take a shower, whatever, all those things you want to do. I do some lavender tea, just anything to prime yourself and not just like, you just jump in bed. So all these things are so important. Stretching, deep breathing, those are important things to incorporate into your life to ensure that you have quality sleep. Caffeine and alcohol is a big sleep disruptor that we see in our society. So definitely making sure that if you're a caffeine drinker, you don't want to drink way past anywhere between 12 and 2, would you say, because of its half-life. It stays in the body for about 8 hours or more. So these are some things. And then I have this here. Let's see if I can make it bigger than it is. It's an acronym for sleep. So S is set your environment, right? The light, the temperature. We have to be very mindful of the quality of the pillows and the mattress. L in sleep is lay out the routine, which is what I just spoke about, whether it's your calm tea, your calm music, journaling. E is eliminate all your technology, the phones, the lights. I had a patient that was the issue. They had the TV in the room. They say they're sleeping, but the blue light was actually affecting the sleep. And the moment they got rid of the TV, took it out of the room, they were sleeping soundly. The other E is eating late at night. Believe it or not, it should be supposed to be 2 to 3 hours before your bedtime. If you're eating and going to bed, you're not only spiking your insulin, you're preventing your growth hormone, and you have all those activities occurring instead of your body actually slowing down to sleep. And then the P in sleep is prioritize your sleep time and space. Space and where you are. So the bed should not be for research, for TV watching. Do you agree? All the other things is only supposed to be meant for intimacy and what?
Right,
Sleep.
right. Sleep. Yep.
So those
And
are some of the things. Oh, there's a
what?
question here. I'll let you add if
Okay.
you want to
I
add
was
to that.
gonna what I was gonna add though was there are some people who actually work nights and
Yes,
work
yes,
shifts.
please. That's important to say. Thank you.
And because we've been talking about sleeping at night, sleeping at night, sleeping at night.
Yes, I'm glad
And
you brought that up.
so it's a particularly challenging thing, but it is not insurmountable.
Mm,
And like I said, the most important thing is to get and work with a sleep specialist, actually. The goal is to always have the 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And so if you are a shift worker, you have to consider sleep as an active issue, meaning that if your shift is, depending on whether you have the second shift or the third shift, will then determine how we plan out, to make sure that you're still getting the optimal sleep that you need. So, for example, if you work the third shift and you get home at 7 in the morning, in fact, starting from your workplace is when you start working on your sleep. So if it is possible to avoid excessive light 2 to 3 hours prior to the end of your shift, you want to do that.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you don't engage in anything too strenuous. If you're going to be driving home, get sunshades when you're driving. The goal is to prevent excessive light. So like Dr. Babalola mentioned, there's something called melatonin that the body produces, which enhances your sleep. Now, light is the opposite. Light stops you from sleeping, and light can overpower melatonin. And so you want to reduce as much light as you can. When you get home, it's not when you start to do the dishes or go to mow the lawn. When you get home is when you drop all your curtains, make sure that the house is dark, and try and go to sleep. Because the longer you stay to do one chore or the other, you're starting a process where you're impacting your circadian rhythm, and you're starting the insomnia process slowly. And so, for those shift workers, that have issues, can't sleep, and it's actually a recognized sleep syndrome. We call it shift work syndrome, and it's treatable too.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. And we do applaud our shift workers, because I don't know, we need you guys. So I applaud you guys. When I was doing residency, I was horrible at night. I went into I did my ER shift. Oh my gosh, the night ones, I was just a hot mess. So we applaud our shift workers. But again, it's figure outable. We just have to make sure that it's active. All the tips that Dr. Olatunji has mentioned will be things that you would need to adapt. There is a question before we wrap it up. Are naps good to take? If so, how long should one nap without disrupting night sleep? So I'll let you answer that question.
Yes. So yeah, I know where. So naps are good, but usually we recommend no more than 20 minutes at any point in time, and no more than 2 naps a day. Because look at it, you have $100 in the bank that you're supposed to spend at night, and you take out $5, $10 here and there. It means that you're taking out of what you're supposed to use at night. That's the simplest explanation. And so, but if you're taking excessive naps, then you may want to check out with a sleep doctor, because it may indicate an underlying disorder.
That's right. There's another question. What is the best sleep position? That's a good one. I've not heard that question before.
So there is no good sleep position. But having said that, some people, tend to have collapse of the airway when they sleep on their back.
I can't sleep on my back. If I have allergies, I snore when I sleep on my back if my nose is blocked.
So there is no quote unquote best sleep position, but whichever position makes you comfortable. But if you do notice that you have issues at one particular position, then you may want to talk to your doctor. Again, it just may indicate something else that may need to be looked at.
Very good. Thank you. This has been great. There's so much to talk about in sleep. So 1 hour cannot do justice.
No, it cannot.
But I like that you have tons of information on your website. So we will just redirect our viewers to get on your website. If they need to put in, get to see you since you're virtual, that will be fantastic. Again, as I said, 50 to 70 million Americans have sleep disorders. 1 in 3 adults are not sleeping.
Correct.
And we need to change that narrative. We need to do better because sleep is paramount for us to achieve optimal well-being. So this has been great. Thank you again, my dear friend.
Thank you for having me.
for joining me today and sharing your thought, just your expertise on sleep. And, look forward to connecting again on another platform.
I'm sure we will.
All right. So to our listeners, again, we want you, with everything that you've heard, right? You've listened. We want you to at least pick one thing that you can do. What thing can you do to improve that sleep? If you're already sleeping 5, maybe just add 1 more hour. If you're doing 6, maybe 1 more hour. And if you need to talk to your doctor, to do an evaluation and assessment, please do so. Let me end with this quote, and this is a really good one too. It says, "No day is so bad that it cannot be fixed with a nap." Now, we did say don't nap more than 20 minutes or multiple naps, so don't nap all day, but suddenly it just overemphasizes the benefits of sleep. So until next time, when we meet again on the holistic perspective, we want you to know that you deserve to live at your finest because you are worth it. So take care and enjoy the rest of the week. Bye.